Hello and welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System, the podcast where three intersectional feminists examine gaming and games through a feminist lens. I'm your host today, I'm Jem, and I'm joined by my friend Alex. So before we get started, if you want to support us, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gaming the system for some exclusive content, or you can send us a one-off donation via PayPal to our email address, wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com.
I thought it would be really nice to talk to you about how you got into gaming. And we're minus Matt today, so I thought it might be interesting because women are usually indoctrinated into gaming through the men in their lives. So I think if that's our story, then that's fair enough. That's the reality that we live in. I also wanted to maybe talk a little bit about the sorts of people who've impacted our gaming experiences or influenced the games that we've played or the games we've liked or not liked, all sorts of things. So this is player 2 who got you into gaming.
Ooh.
So how did you get into gaming, Alex?
So, I guess my introduction to gaming, as I've mentioned many times in the past, is in the mid-90s, about 1996-ish, with the demo of Tomb Raider 2, which my uncle picked up on PC Gamer magazine. The days when discs were on the front of magazines. And
I
they came
miss
with
those days.
I know,
miss
right?
that.
They're so good. And they came with the magazine and it would have all the reviews and articles all about upcoming games on it. And this one happened to have Tomb Raider 2. And I think it did probably feature an image of Lara Croft on the front of the magazine, but I can't remember exactly. But it was really my uncle that obviously played. And then we would sit around the PC in his lounge and watch it. And my mum, because my uncle lived with us as a family, all in the same house. And we used to sit and watch it. And I think it was about 3 months from what we can all recollect that we took to figure out that you can get out of the bottom of the cave where you start in the first level, which is the Great Wall of China. So we would spend about 3 months seeing the helicopter fly off, killing the tiger, killing another tiger if you go into the water, and then just jumping around some rocks and not knowing how to get up to the bits higher up on the cliff, which were clearly climbable, but we couldn't figure it out. And then as soon as we figured out that actually it was quite difficult, and there's no signposting, of course, in these older games, you would have to do a jump onto the wall and then backflip off the wall onto the edge of the ledge so that Lara would be standing right on the edge of the ledge. But yeah, it was quite a complicated maneuver. And we played with a joystick, like, you know, the flight simulator joysticks, where you had like a big stick. And that's how we controlled Lara. It was very, very arcade, like not your normal keyboard and mouse controls, because I for one, found them too difficult because I couldn't look down and look at the screen. But that was my very long-winded introduction to gaming, shall we say. But from that point where we knew we could go further than the bottom of the cave, we were obsessed with Tomb Raider, and then probably bought the whole game and the game before that. And that's where it's really started out. Once we got a PC in our half of the house, that's when we started getting games, like I mentioned, like the more educational types of games Mum get from like Marks and Spencer English and Maths and stuff, or Wallace and Gromit, all that sort of thing. And then once my sister was born, obviously got into gaming herself, we would play things like, do you remember the Pets games?
Yeah,
you had like cats and dogs.
Yeah.
They were like essentially, but that you could play.
Yeah, like
and
The
you
Sims,
could,
but for pets.
but for
Like really
pets.
basic Sims.
That's
pets.
right, yeah. And you could pet the cats or the dogs, and you could feed them, and they grow from kittens to cats and then have lots of kittens of their own and all sorts of stuff. Then we went from that on to Sims, and that's Ellie's game choice, my sister. And we would, of course, play things like Barbie Detective, Barbie Explorer, and then the PlayStation came in, of course, and we started playing games on that. So it's kind of very much rooted in family, and then also what my family could find to buy me that they thought was appropriate for my age and also my sister's age. Then as we grew up through our sort of primary school, secondary school years, I think a lot of the games we played were tie-ins, films or books that we would have read. So things that we were already familiar with, but that had been created in video game format. So, for example, all of the Harry Potters, some of the Hobbit, there's a couple of Hobbit ones, Lord of the Rings ones. Obviously, all the Tomb Raiders we kept going with because that was our franchise. And then I think I got into Spyro when I was between primary and secondary.
I never played Spyro.
He had a friend whose daughters were playing Spyro, and we were like, what's this game? Can we have a go? And then we started getting into Spyro. So it was very much through the people we knew in our lives around us and like who we went to visit with parents and that sort of thing and what they were doing. Then I sort of didn't really deviate from the like already established I were. So I was very sort of not what you might necessarily call a hardcore gamer at that age. And then once I got into like university and met my first boyfriend after university, he introduced me to games like Uncharted, Assassin's Creed. He was like, well, if you like Tomb Raider, you're going to like these
Absolutely,
types of games.
Yeah.
And that really marked a sort of evolution, as it were. If you imagine my early years as like the start of Pokemon, and then I'd get like further and further through my evolution of playing games and sort of widening my scope of what I was enjoying in terms of games, because I wouldn't really go out of my comfort zone because I think I find a lot of games quite scary and I wouldn't want to get scared or anything like that. But I think once I'd had that experience with either recommendations through family, friends or my first boyfriend, I would then begin to see actually that gaming's a lot larger than I thought it was and there's a lot out there to play. And that's when I started sort of expanding the sort of catalogue that I played and sort of making choices based on my own previous game catalogue and what I liked. And maybe I'll try this new game. No one else I know has played it, but I'll give it a go. And sort of got more confident with the types of games I played. And now with my current partner, Tom, I've gotten more into things like board games and tabletop gaming. So again, it's another sort of evolution in terms of the Pokemon of my gaming life, as it were. Branched out into those different types of games as well, because Tom naturally plays a lot more tabletop TRPGs. I've naturally sort of picked them up through him, and I find them very enjoyable. Like I probably play a lot more board games together as well as gaming with each other. But yeah, I think in terms of the people that have influenced me, I'd definitely say it's largely the male members of my family, but also my mum really enjoys watching us play as well. Having it feel like a properly meaningful hobby, I guess, is to have that involvement from family. And of course, you know about our love of board games and Christmas games at Christmas, like the old-fashioned sorts of games that we play as well. So I guess it is a large part of family. And then as other people have come into my life, it's usually the men in my life there as well. Of course, you guys in the podcast. That's been the area where I've increased catalogue of games and the types of games that I play through recommendations from yourself, Jem, and Matt as well.
Yeah, I think the podcast has massively influenced my gaming experience, if only to make me prepared to sort of try different things or step out of my comfort zone or whatever. And that's been a really fun sort of exploration. I think in terms of who got me into gaming, it was my brother, because he asked for a ZX Spectrum back in the early 80s. And so we were playing like little, really basic graphic sort of platform games. I played things like Donkey Kong and Manic Miner and, those sorts of games. I'd never really, they were fun, but they didn't really catch me. And it was really, the games that really caught me were the sort of text adventure sort of choose your own adventure kind of style games that had this real narrative story to them, and it was all about what are you going to do? Are you going to go north, east, south, west? Or are you going to attack so and so with your sword and things like that? I really loved those games. And then later, I really got into a game called Dungeon Master. It was basically, well, I suppose it was like old 3D, but it was basically like just walking forward and then you could go sort of different directions. And it was first person and you'd come up against something and then you would have to do a spell by combining different symbols together in a certain combination, and then that would cast the spell. There was quite a lot of thinking and quite a lot of note writing and map drawing and all of that. But the reason that I played that was because my boyfriend at the time had an old, I want to say Amstrad. And so I played it on that. He dug it out of the attic and we sort of set it all up. It was recent enough that it still worked, but old enough that it would be classed as retro. So that would have been in the late 90s. I had friends at school who had consoles. Somebody had one of the old, like a SNES, and we used to go around there and play like the little racing games and things like that. Or more often they were playing the racing games and we would sort of hang about. So it was always around me, but I don't know if I necessarily took ownership of it until I was sort of in my late teens. And then I got into online gaming, and that was when I got into playing multi-user dungeons, MUDs, and really enjoyed that. But again, I think for me, what really kind of sucked me into it was the social aspect. So it was gaming, but it was chatting and gaming with other people. And I think that's one of the things that, to me, is quite important for my gaming experience, is the social element of it. And I think that's why doing this podcast has been such a positive influence for me, is because it provides a sort of social element to the gaming, because many games these days are not sort of social experiences. Like for me anyway, I don't play in the online world very much anymore. I don't really want to, because I find it quite toxic. I find it quite hard work, really. So that doesn't really appeal to me. So it's nice to have another element that sort of provides that social aspect that I used to get when I was mudding. And the thing is I liked the mudding because I liked playing alongside chatting, because it would fill in the boredom. So like when I played World of Warcraft, I liked nothing more than chatting away to somebody whilst I was grinding for some herbs or some rare metals or something like that, or doing boring escort quests and things like that. It was so much more fun whilst chatting away to somebody. It was definitely men almost all the way along who influenced my gaming. And I find that frustrating, because I think, well, why did it take men to, what was it? I came into contact with other women, certainly in the online space, but there wasn't much camaraderie or sisterliness going on there. It was very competitive. The women in that space were very competitive.
It is interesting when you think about like the sort of gender divide, I guess, and the exposure that we have to gaming is often sort of dependent on the people around us, and usually at the time we were growing up, it was men that were gaming. It's really interesting as well, the sort of social impact that you've talked about. When I think about when I mentioned getting into Team Red when we were very young, it was essentially the event of the evening. So my uncle, his half of the house is the other side of the kitchen. And whenever he would start Tomb Raider up, he'd turn the volume up really loud. So we would hear the theme tune and be like, oh my God, Tomb Raider. And then we'd run to the other side of the house.
I love that.
And,
That's so cute.
Mum would come through eventually and sit with us and watch it. And we'd all try and work out, or we'd have the walkthrough, Stella's walkthrough, shout outs to her. She was a very prolific walkthrough writer for all the Tomb Raiders. Martin would have them, my uncle, he'd have them printed out into ring binders, into files. And I would have it open on my lap and read through the walkthrough, because you can't play those games without a walkthrough, really. It would be essentially the entertainment for the evening. So it was very social. And then, of course, we'd have the board gaming. And then I think, yeah, there are aspects of my gaming which are very, very sort of so, and I'm happy about that because that's important as well. But I think now that I've started playing more board games and stuff, that's that social aspect. And of course, playing with you guys when we're on streaming and talking about gaming as well, has definitely welcomed back that social aspect now that I've met, obviously, we're all adults and we've moved away from home. I think that transition, obviously, from the 90s through to where are we now, the mid-2020s, there's a lot more that people can choose to do to entertain themselves of an evening. And I'm very pleased, I think, that we live so close to such a good board game cafe, which
I know,
has been
so lucky.
An excellent episode of this podcast where we've interviewed Katie and Sarah, who set up Wayfarer's Rest, the local board game cafe, to me. And that is a very sort of inclusive space where there are a whole mixture of different people, from families, groups of friends, people just catching up over coffee. But it is not by any means heavily one side of the gender spectrum compared to the other, which it can be in some sort of board game cafe setups. But I think having that space, and for especially kids coming in, seeing a whole bunch of different people there, they're going to be less sort of influenced, consciously or not, by the people who are playing those games as well. So I think that's very important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first started, well, not first started mudding, but when I went, my first people who played the game, I was one of, I think there was about 40 people there, and I was women, young girls. I mean, we were all like 20, 18, 20,
Gosh.
no, 20, yeah, 19. I think I was 19 when I went to my first one.
Was it quite?
Yeah, it was really intimidating. And I actually took my brother with me, who was completely useless. And I don't really know. I mean, I went, and I was, I don't think I would have been able to go if my brother hadn't been there. And they were lovely. And I'm still in touch with people that I met then, which is just awesome. And they were all really kind to me. I felt intimidated to go, but actually once I met everyone, they were all lovely. And it was a good group of people. But over the years, obviously, that balance did definitely shift. And by the time I was playing World of Warcraft, it was much closer to sort of probably a 60-40 split in favour of the men. And there were loads of other women in the guild that I was part of. It was probably a 60-40 split. And the women were all ages, ranging from late teens to mums, or women in their 40s. It was really nice because actually there was a group of gamer girls there that we could interact with. And I think that really started to shift my approach to gaming. My gaming in those years was heavily influenced by my ex-husband, who I had met during my mudding years. It was very much his thing. And so over the years, I began to feel that I was doing it more for him than for me. Yeah. We often played the games that he wanted to play. We played when he wanted to play them. And actually, it became quite problematic for me when I was working. We played StarCraft together, and over the local network at home, our LAN network. That would be fine, but he would always want to go on later than I would. And so it got to a point where I would be like, actually, I'm just not going to play. I don't want to start because we can't stop. And I think that was a lot more to do with his issues than my issues, but I was too young and innocent to realise what was going on there. So we got to a point where actually gaming together became really hard work. And then later we got into World of Warcraft, and that problem really only got worse. But the benefit was that he didn't necessarily need me to be there because it was a multiplayer game. He would be on playing late and I would leave earlier. But I had like quite a lot of, trauma associated with that period of my life, not for the gaming reasons, for other reasons, but the gaming really suffered from that.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting for me is that after I left that relationship, it was actually women who got me back into gaming. So it absolutely was. And I'd tried really hard to fall back in love with gaming. And I did feel this massive gap in my life where when I'd stopped gaming, I definitely missed it, but I couldn't find a way back to it. And I'd sort of dip in and dip out and dip in and dip out. So I was always like a geek. And because of my World of Warcraft sort of heritage, I think that was one of the things I talked about that in some setting to do with the Women's Equality Party, and Caroline heard me talking about it, and then she pulled us together, so me, Matt and herself, because she knew that we were all into gaming. You know, she pulled us together and set us off on this journey. And it just really opened up this whole different experience and different relationship with gaming that I hadn't had. And I think it's really lovely that it was women who helped me come back to gaming, you know, because now I'm in regular contact with Caroline. She's not on the pod anymore, but you know, she's still very much in my life. And we game together, we play D&D together, and we talk games together a lot. Finn, who's been on the pod, also very much into their gaming. And we've done a few episodes with them about Baldur's Gate 3. And we all play board game arena games. But it's just been really nice to have an experience with a different group of people and not just that sort of male dominated approach. And it also has given another perspective on how you fit gaming into different lives. You know, we all have very different lives. And I've really enjoyed speaking with you, Alex, about especially things along the lines of guilt and social attitudes and social expectations and all of that. And it's been really nice to have those conversations with a fellow female, because we do have pressures put on us, and we have pressures put on us by society, and we absorb them. And even when we've got supportive families and relationships and friends, those pressures are still there being beamed into our brains from, you know. So I think that's been a really positive experience for me.
That's it. I'm really glad to hear how positive it's been for you, Jem. That was lovely. I wanted to just bring up before we end the episode as well. I know you shared with me about this board gaming retreat for women only up in like near the Lake District, I think. They're doing a second round of sort of recruiting, unquote recruiting for it. And I think I read the other day, they had wanted to keep it to 50 spaces so that they could keep the atmosphere quite nice, and it's essentially a weekend retreat for women to go to, and just spend the weekend board gaming and occasionally doing makeup and just chatting and chilling out and stuff. And apparently it's been so popular, the sign up to the newsletter to hear about the next one. And they tried to do like a legacy sign up, so the people that have supported them and booked on previously can book again, but they've nearly filled up all the 50 spaces already. Wow. And then they announced that they'd had over 650 people sign up to the newsletter. So they were like, we're stuck, we don't know what to do, but we're going to try and figure it out. So there's definitely demand for women's gaming spaces where we can just take a load off, to use an Americanism, and chill out and spend time gaming away from the pressures of life. And I think that's really telling, just hearing about that. The oversubscription to the newsletter the other day, which just shows like how many, not only women that game there are out there, but how many women that game want a space to go and relax and game in as well.
Yeah. To be able to game in a space where you're not having to worry about whether some guy thinks you're coming onto them or not. It's like that is the thing, because it can be so exhausting in those environments. And I think the other issue is, and this is very stereotypical, so I'm going to put massive like pinches of salt around it. But, you know, the sort of common trope really around gaming men is that they're socially inept, and, you know, that they're kind of like, oh, it's a girl, you know, and all of that. And I think whether that's true or not, it means that as a woman, when you go into those environments, that's in the back of your head, you know, like, am I going to be treated in an odd way because I'm female? And so you're kind of on your guard. I think that there is a perception of how men will behave in certain situations that may not actually be related to how they actually behave, but it will impact women going into those scenarios.
It's also whether you're going to get patronised as well, or like man-blamed. I think that's a big thing as well, where someone will have a game that we've not played before, and a man, for example, might decide that this is their moment to mansplain the entire game. And sort of not let anyone else have any breathing room, which can be frustration at times. But yeah, to have that environment where you're literally going and you know that it's all a bunch of women and you not necessarily know any of them, but you're also there to kind of connect and make friends and just have a nice chilled out time. And I think it's a really good initiative. But it definitely sounds like they're going to make plans to hopefully accommodate more people if they possibly can, but they may be reliant on extra funding.
We'll put a link to it in our Well, that's been so interesting, and I think it's a shame that Matt wasn't here, because I'd like to hear his sort of game's origin, but I also think it was good for you and I to be able to have a chat about it, because I think women do come to gaming in a different way from the way that men do it, and I think that has quite a big impact on their gaming experience. And I think we could speak for another half hour about all the ways that the men have influenced the kind of games that we've played. You know, it's like your experience with Lara Croft. Maybe if you'd been introduced to Manic Miner or Sonic or something, it would have been a different experience for you. But I think there's lots more to talk about, but we have run out of time today. So thank you so much, Alex. Always fun to chat. And yeah, we're here every Thursday, and you can give us a like, follow us, share us, let us know what you want to talk about, and also let us know your experiences and how you came into gaming and who influenced your gaming choices. I'm sure we'll be revisiting this subject. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.